So in the past years, Panasonic was really crushing the video and mirrorless market, but there was still one feature that we all missed in any Panasonic camera basically, which was 4K 60 uncropped and also 4K 120. Well, the S1R Mark II does that and even has some serious more features when it comes to photo and when it comes to video. Everything that you want to know, you're gonna find out in this video. Coming up. Hi guys, my name is Paul, I'm a German-based cinematographer and this channel is all about filmmaking, gear reviews, but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribe, that really helps the channel. Thank you. So this is the S1R Mark II and in the future I will also compare it to the S5 IIX and also to the S1H to see if it is really beneficial if you're a video shooter to go for that camera or even to wait for an S1H Mark II if that will come. So that's maybe a good part to talk about the physics, the body design of the S1R Mark II. First of all, what I really like is that we have now inside the shutter is closing when you switch the camera off, so you don't have the problem that any dust gets into the camera or something like that. The body overall from the S1 isn't close to the physics of the old S1 or S1H, for example, which I show you right here. It is much smaller, so it's very comparable to the S5 IIX, with one different, that the grip is a little bit deeper, meaning if you have big hands like me, you have a better grip, and also ergonomically that makes more sense to me. Also the flip out screen is fully articulating, as you can see right here, so this is pretty cool. I really liked it. We also now have a dedicated photo and video switch, so you can switch here between photo, video and S&Q, which I really like, and the rest basically stays as you know it from Panasonic. The only little gripe that I have with this one is that the on and off switch is a little bit further on the back, so it's not as easy to reach with your finger as I'm used to. And we have two tail lights, one in front and one on the back, which is pretty cool. We don't have any flash sync port for timecode or anything like that. But overall, I really like that body design. So the S1R Mark II is the first Panasonic camera that records 8K and also does that internally. And we have a bunch of recording modes and I will put them down below so that you can see side by side which one is for you. The camera can also record ProRes internally and also ProRes RAW internally. So we have that option, and for the moment we don't have RAW over HDMI, but as Panasonic told me, it will be free of charge via firmware update that comes in the near future. So, and also the OpenGate 8K recording internally will be available via firmware. So we can record up to 30 frames in the OpenGate mode. In the other modes we can record up to 60 frames, which also looks good. So 4K 60 finally, full frame, and also 4K 120. But wait, it is not really totally full frame, because if we align all these shots side by side, we see that we have a slight crop if we go up to everything which is above 30 frames basically, and then also there's also an additional crop if you want to use 4K 120. So what is the low light capability of the S1R Mark II? So in general I would say it's pretty comparable to the S5 II, S5 IIX and also S1H. We don't have the second high base ISO. The one that we have is at 1000 and the second is at 2000, so between the dynamic range expansion mode on or off. But therefore I was a little bit concerned maybe the low light capability isn't as good. But I can assure you, you can also use this camera up to ISO 12800, which is a pretty good value, and you can, yeah, even ISO 6400, 3200 looks pretty clean. I think 25600 is noisy, so I wouldn't use that, but 12800 is a pretty good value for that. The IBIS on the camera has 8 stops of IBIS when you use a lens, and as you can see right here, the IBIS works really great. One small feature that I really like is that the camera finally also has false color internally, so we know from Panasonic that they already have a bunch of assisting features in the camera to judge your image and your exposure, but now also we have finally false color, as I've just said, and you also have an explanation of what color is representing what value. So I really liked it, and we also can record 32-bit float internally when we use the XLR adapter, which we can also use for the GX7, for example. There was one mode that I was really interested about, and that's the so-called dynamic range expansion mode. When the mode is turned off, the dynamic range is about 13 stops, as Panasonic claims, so the same as on the S5 IIX. But if you turn it on, you gain an extra stop of dynamic range, but you will have worse rolling shutter. By the way, the rolling shutter has improved in general when it's turned off. When it's turned on, it's pretty comparable to what the S5 IIX is, for example. What is also interesting in this regard is that we have different base ISOs right now. So when the dynamic range expansion mode is turned off, we have a base ISO of 200, which is pretty wild, and 1000. And we also have an expansion, when a dynamic range expansion mode is turned on, we have 400 and 2000. So as we can see in this test image here, if we turn on dynamic range expansion mode, that our overexposed sky is no longer overexposed. And I also did a few tests outside, and we can really see that if we turn it on, that we gain a lot of detail back in the image, which is pretty great. But I also wanted to see how much is it really, so I also did an over and under exposing test, and I did that with the dynamic range expansion mode turned on and turned off. So when we turn the dynamic range expansion mode off, we have about 2 stops, and also 3 stops looks great. 3.5 stops is the maximum that you can overexpose the S1R Mark II. Beyond that, it is clipped and is not usable. In underexposure, the camera does really well, so 1 stop, 2 stops, and even 3 stops underexposed looks really good. I would go even so far to say the camera is usable up to -4 stops underexposure, which is definitely an improvement to the S1H and also S5 IIX. By the way, I will release also comparison to those two cameras, so stick around here on the channel. So this already brings us to 7.5 stops. But let's now turn on the dynamic range expansion mode, and first starting by overexposing again. So as we can expect, 2 stops over, 3 stops over, 3.5 stops over work great, but 4 stops is the max. If we switch to 4.5 stops, we can clearly see that my skin is clipped and also everything above is clipped. So 4 stops overexposure is the maximum with dynamic range expansion mode turned on. Now let's see if we can gain basically anything in the shadows. So I underexposed also the camera this way, and it looks pretty much the same as with the dynamic range expansion mode off. So 3 stops under looks good. Also 4 stops under is the maximum here. So I didn't see any kind of more noise or anything, fixed noise patterns or anything like that. So this brings me in total to 4 stops in overexposure and 4 stops of underexposure, which in total is 8 stops of exposure latitude. So it's not a full stop as Panasonic claims, but it is at least half a stop. So all in all, the S1R is a pretty exciting camera, but a really big question is, where does it sit in the lineup of Panasonic? And also, is a S1H Mark II coming? That was also my biggest question, and Panasonic is not saying anything about it, unfortunately. But I think we can really be sure that there will be an S1H Mark II, because as of right now, this camera is really fully featured with everything what video features we want to have, right? But this one is also no real comparison to the GH7, which also has time code. So therefore there is currently no full frame top tier option from Panasonic, which is really video focused. So therefore I think we can really be sure that the S1H Mark II is coming. We just don't know when. They also didn't announce anything like that. I was expecting that they say, hey, we are working on that camera, it will be released then and then, but unfortunately they didn't tell us anything about it. But overall, this camera here, the S1R Mark II, is a pretty big step, and also from the cost of the camera, which is $3,500, is pretty good in the competition when you see what Sony offers, what Canon offers. So therefore, I think this camera is a really great catch. Also, always the price value proposition of Panasonic is just really awesome. Personally, I really like that camera, and I will also use that camera from now on because it also has 4K 60 uncropped, which is pretty great. But personally, I will also wait for the S1H Mark II because that's then the proper camera, which also has all the video features that I personally need, such as timecode and everything like that. I also like the smaller form factor, but as I've said, we really have to wait what Panasonic comes out, and I'm also pretty excited if there will be an S1 anymore. I think they will go the same route, so there will be an S1 as kind of the middle option, which sits in between them both, and there also will be an S1H Mark II. And I hope this one will not have an 8K sensor, more than maybe a 6K sensor and some additional features, because that camera is already so feature packed when it comes to video. They need some kind of a USP, unique selling proposition, for the S1H that really sets it apart from the S1R Mark II. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense in my case. So let me know in the comments below what you think about that camera. Are you excited? Are you also waiting for the S1H Mark II? And yeah, see you guys in my next one. Cheers!